Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I am talking all about AI with Oliver Sissons from Reboot Online. He's the search director. How you doing, Oliver? Thanks for joining.
Hey, Vince. Yeah, not bad. Thank you for having me on. I've been listening to the podcast for a while, so I'm really pleased to be joining you.
Yeah, I've been following your stuff. Love everything that Reboot does. Definitely think everyone should follow what Oliver is talking about. And we're going to talk about some of that here in this podcast. Before we do, I just want to remind everyone to like and subscribe, share the stuff with your colleagues. If you have questions, interact, leave some comments. I'm sure Oliver will be more than happy to answer any of the questions about it. So, Oliver, I think a good place to start with this is kind of terminology. I left this kind of open-ended, just saying we're going to be talking about AI. Obviously, for me, it's the important part is going to be, how it's placed into things like digital PR and SEO. It's really why I wanted to have you on, because I know, you guys at Reboot are doing a lot of that kind of crossover. You've done some fun projects and stuff in the digital PR space. So but I want to back up here because these days it's like word soup, word salad with all the terminologies and acronyms. So let's just define a couple of these terms so people kind of have a baseline of what we're talking about. So I've heard, when we're talking about optimizing for AI, I've heard things like GEO, SEO, obviously, AIO is, Google. So what is your term for kind of optimizing for AI? Let's start there.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. You're right. SEOs do love an acronym, and we also love to argue what the acronyms mean or don't mean as well. So there's a lot to unpick there. But yeah, we use the term GEO, Generative Engine Optimization. And obviously that's speaking kind of to optimizing visibility for, I'm going to throw another acronym in now, LLMs, which most people know as, large language models. And yeah, basically optimizing brand visibility for these artificial intelligence and AI tools that are generating content in response to user inputs and queries, basically.
Yeah. So I guess for this purposes, let's stick with GEO.
I'd say on the AIO side, even that's quite an interesting one because a lot of people are using that term to describe just visibility tracking and improving visibility in AI generally initially. But then obviously you saw, like you say, Google introduced these AI overviews. So then they've kind of stolen the AIO, acronym there for themselves. So you're really seeing this splinter, aren't you, of what terms people are throwing around. So I think you're spot on about picking one for the purpose of this talk, but generally as well, and remaining consistent to that. So yeah, GEO is the one we tend to go with.
Yeah, we'll see if SEOs can get GEO to stick, using some GEO strategies here. So, okay, you've talked recently. I am, obviously big on data side and following the research is telling us rather than what Google is saying to us. Like a lot of times those things don't necessarily match. So you've mentioned leaks recently. There are a lot of leaks coming out. What have you seen? What are they saying? What do we know that's kind of trustworthy at this point?
Yeah, so it probably echoes a lot of what you've seen and we've all seen in the SEO space. Google has public statements and documentation, and then occasionally you do see patents and through antitrust trials and things like that. You get some insight into what's going on behind the scenes, and we're seeing a bit of that already in AI, like you say. So one recent example would be there's a gentleman called Hans Cronenberg. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. Did a really good piece about a Anthropic system prompt leak. He's got a website, GPT Insights. Got a ton of useful information. Basically, he was sharing detail about this leak, which is a system prompt effectively, for those that don't know, when it comes to AI and large language models like Claude, in this case, that's the LLM that belongs to Anthropic, the company this belongs to. It's almost a set of instructions for how the AI should behave, what its purpose is, how it should respond to user inputs and queries and things like that. So they've already released little bits of details of that, modified versions of how the AI works. And whether you call it a full leak or not, essentially this was, the real detail of how one of their models, Claude, responds to different queries, the decisions it makes, how it makes those decisions. And what's really interesting about that is as you start reading up on how this AI model has been instructed to behave. You quickly get into details like when should it link to an external source and what decision goes into making that choice? What are the type of search categories that it might come across and how should it handle those? So you can kind of almost see from these leaks or these revelations, whatever you call them, you can start unpicking, how are these AI models deciding what to respond with, and how does that impact what we do with marketers and SEOs and GEOs maybe now, to enhance visibility of the brands that we're working on. So yeah, that's one example of kind of a really interesting bit of information that came out more recently. And then you also have,
And Oliver, sorry, just to reiterate that the leak was specifically with Claude that it would link to things if it didn't already have it in its like corpus of information, right? Like if the link was saying something new, is that what it was?
yeah, correct. I think the example they gave was, or Hans in this case gave, the resource I'm referring to was, certain questions might be able to be answered from the training data off the bat. So what's the capital of a popular city? And the AI is very confident what the answer is. So it doesn't need to really reference external sources. It's just going to provide you that answer. Unfortunately, if your blog used to rely on ranking for those kind of keywords, you're going to need to change your strategy, because in the AI world, you're probably going to see those traffic generators doing less volume, doing less numbers. Whereas, yeah, if it was a topic that required some research, so the AI to actually search itself for information, so maybe that's a time sensitive one. Perhaps it didn't have the context it needed in the training stage to actually answer your question. Perhaps it's just something that could benefit from throwing in some research or throwing in some sources. Yeah, that really helped dictate whether any websites at all were going to be referenced by this AI. So yeah, real key starting point for any marketer is, what should I even be writing about and targeting? And that kind of starts helping answer that question in the world of AI.
Yeah. And we'll get into a little bit of that. I really want to drill into like how PR helps with this sort of thing. But I think stepping back with these leaks, and I think you had another one, I kind of cut you off there, but with something like that, Claude is, not one of the more widely used technologies. I'd say it's, what is it? ChatGPT, then Google. I forget what the hierarchy is, but in your experience, do they all work the same, or, are these findings something that you can take to other LLMs or technologies? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. I think personally, I find they're quite different, whether you're using, like you say, Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude. Some of them have strength in some areas. Personally, when I've used Claude, it's been quite good for software, drafting Python script, things like that I might use just in normal SEO day-to-day tasks. But different individuals probably have completely different preferences and experiences. Perhaps it depends how you talk to the AI as well. But yeah, we're finding across the board, they do tend to be quite different. But the other side of that coin, I suppose, is once you start digging into this whole new area, and even that's quite a big debate at the moment, isn't it? Is this just SEO in a new form, or is this actually a whole new thing? And our take at Reboot is that both. It's an overlap of what we've been doing, but there are real differences I'm sure we can discuss on this call about what we're seeing when it comes to AI visibility and GEO. But I'd say once you start reading up on these things, you do also notice the parallels, LLMs and the way these AI models are being trained. There's a lot of similarity across the board. So you get both. You get to know where each model is kind of special, but also the fundamentals are good to read up on, aren't they? In terms of how are these things trained and how does that influence how we're going to be able to optimize for visibility in them? So yeah, I guess it depends is the old SEO phrase, but perhaps that was applied to GEO as well.
Yeah. Well, let's get into kind of the PR side of things, because then I think we can speak a little bit more towards what types of studies and stuff you guys have done to try to show up in results. So, broadly speaking, I think at least from what I'm feeling and seeing, brand mentions seem to be kind of the universal connector now between PR and showing up in LLMs, showing up. I'm going to make sure I'm using the right terminology, showing up in AI results, right? So does this mean, or I'll put it to you this way. What does this mean for PRs? If brand mentions obviously like are important, like that seems like it's a tough task, but it doesn't seem to be much different than what PR teams should be doing anyway, right?
No, I think you're definitely right that brand mentions are only growing in importance. I think many SEOs, Reboot included, have long tried to argue that even before GEO and AI optimization has started developing, brand mentions have always been, a promising signal in terms of, first it was only follow links. And then we had Google confirm that no follows are actually treated as a hint as well. Even at that stage, many of us were already thinking and mentioned must factor in here as well. We have an understanding of how the web works and people don't always link. You're 100% right that brand mentions are, very much the name of the game going into GEO. In terms of, are they hard to get? I mean, yeah, I think you probably know as much as anyone, digital PR and quality led link building and earning real, authority brand mentions is and will remain incredibly difficult. I mean, everyone is looking for that. And that does really seem to be, one of the key pieces of the puzzle that we're going to have going forward. So if you think of discussed before how if the model can answer a question based on its training data, you've already got this question of, well, surely brand mentions in a good volume and in relevant context within the training data is going to help this AI model build up its understanding of who you are, what you're relevant for. And when that user answers or asks a question that ties directly to your product or your service, if you're one of the dominant brands in your space, as evidenced by people in the industry mentioning you, talking about you, sharing details of how to get in touch with you, things like that, then yeah, we would 100% expect that you're going to see greater visibility than the brand that is never mentioned. So yeah, PR is definitely front and center.
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds a lot like SEO in that regard, but how is it different? Like you want to show up in highly visible areas, right? Like, or I guess I should say, how is it different than link building, right? Like, it sounds like it's link building without the links. Am I
Yeah.
wrong?
Well, I think this is where the overlap comes in, right? So people doing the highest quality, link building, if you will, or link earning really is probably the better word, where you're really earning those editorial mentions or links off the back of being a brilliant brand, publishing amazing content, all these kind of generic things that Google themselves say you have long said you need to do. So to do that to begin with is already incredibly difficult. But in terms of how it's different, I mean, relevancy has always been important, but in the old days of page rank and authority, you can often get away with, you know, being selective with relevancy. Again, everything's balanced. You don't want to go too far, but standard search, traditional SEO, it's always been this balancing act. But when it comes to the AI models and their understanding of not just the mention coming from authority site, but what's the context of the mention in itself, that is becoming much more important. And many people might say it was important already, but even more so going into this era of GEO. So context matters more than ever. We've been experimenting with something called context wrapping, which is, not just anchor text. It's actually, like we say, the surrounding context of a link is really important. And whether it's an index study you're outreaching or a survey piece that's broadly related to your product, your service, you can definitely do things to really reinforce that context that you want an AI model to, consume. Are you an expert in your industry? What evidence do you have of that? Have you won awards in the space? And what individuals behind your team are, really credible in this industry? So there's quite a few of these things that maybe we all should have been doing this whole time, but we definitely need to be doing now as we look at what AI models are recommending, who they're citing, and what things go into making that happen.
So let's break some of these down, Oliver, because I think that's really interesting. So this idea of context wrapping for PR, I remember back to when I, was working with an agency and there was a particular client who had a PR team. Like we were doing link building and kind of digital PR, but they had more of like a traditional PR team on their end.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really hard for us to kind of connect on things. But every now and then they'd reach out and say, what does the SEO team have to say? What does the SEO agency say we need to do? And it was always like, whenever you mention your brand, make sure you mention these keywords as well. We are construction rental company blank name, or, we are digital PR tool BuzzStream. We are email outreach tool BuzzStream. I mean, is it as simple as that for this kind of context wrapping?
It's a good step. But again, when you think about how brands are being cited in AI models, it's no longer purely ranking the top one. There's a lot to consider in that. And, perhaps we'll get to what the industry and what these AI companies are saying about how they understand the intent behind searches. But you quite quickly understand that personalization is bigger than ever, and different consumers find different things important. So to one consumer, reviews are the most important thing. To the next one, it might be price. And to the next one, it might be industry expertise. And have they won awards? Are they recommended by the industry guilds or whatever that is? And this isn't always context that you'd include when link building. Usually you would do what you say, you'd include the keyword. And if you got the follow link with the keyword from an authority site, you'd be over the moon. You'd be happy with that. Whereas now, like we say, you really have to be including and thinking hard about what context you want to include when you're running your outreach campaign. So this requires analysis, this requires thoughts, this requires a deep dive into the AI models themselves to see what things are they sharing when they're recommending brands in this space. And those are the things that you want to be leaning into. Those are the things you want to be cultivating and then including in your outreach as well. So yeah, a lot of this is, good practice for brand building generally, but it's certainly things that in my experience, a lot of SEOs have never really thought too much about, or at least not applied in their link building. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like some people go as far as just like competitive analyses of like, here's all the here are the sites that have linked to my competitors. I need to get links from these. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like a good starting point, but for LLMs, but it sounds like you're saying more so, match customer query types that might lead them to your brand and see how the LLMs are talking about it. So it's like, if we are a car rental company in Leeds or something, best car rental in Leeds, what's the cheapest car rental in Leeds, and, who has the best reviews, and understanding where it's pulling
Mhm.
information from, and then trying to get cited in those sites. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's also a step. And, again, there's a lot that goes into building authority in a space, isn't there? So yeah, 100% we'd start with what are the LLMs that we're looking at and interested in driving visibility for? What are they citing already? And like you say, you might come across a good few places to start, maybe certain review platforms, listicles. We see this a lot. We've been testing this a lot in terms of, quite old school really approaches, the 10 best car companies in Leeds. And yeah, getting featured there, getting a link or a mention is great and could well help you, drive visibility. But I guess this brings us on to the wider point of what works today might not necessarily work 6
Yes.
months, a year from now. We know this as SEOs, we might find things that drive visibility today that may or may not be useful to do for long-term visibility. And obviously that will be developing quite quickly, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah. So let's get into that, because that's the biggest question I have, and the biggest concern with any of this stuff is it's all so new. It's moving so quickly
yeah.
that I almost feel handcuffed to the point where I'm like, well, I'm just going to kind of fall back on my general marketing knowledge and just be like, I'm just going to put out, I mean, it's what Google said. It's like, put out great content, try to interact with people, where I think they would want to learn about BuzzStream, for instance. It's like, as an agency, I think it's great that like you guys are constantly testing things. And I think maybe, if a company or agency or whatever website has the resources to do that, that's important to continue to do that. But like for the small business,
Mhm.
for the agency who's working with small, but they don't have the resources. Like, what do you recommend in these situations?
Yeah, I think we recommend leaning into, you know, what you do have on hand. So if you're a smaller business, likelihood you've got access to a founder or a senior team with considerable industry knowledge and depth. So even there's a great place to start, right? Expert comments and reactive stories and industry trends. And again, just good marketing, like you say, is a great place to start. When it comes to GEO specifically, again, dig into what the models are saying about, your brand and your competitors, and start picking out what common themes are being expressed here. Are my competitors always being referenced in this positive way that I'm not? And if you're not, that's high priority, an area you definitely need to tackle. And to be honest, we see this a lot with auditing for SEO as well, where there's always 150 things you could do. The smaller the business, the more important perhaps it is to really hone in on what are the 10 things I need to do to drive the biggest growth, the biggest gain. I mean, I suspect that's going to apply all the same for GEO and for AI. The added benefit is maybe a lot of the AI can help you here as well. Perhaps also talking about how AI can be used to actually scale up your marketing efforts without having, like you say, a 50-strong person marketing team. So maybe the challenge is also the solution in terms of what AI can do for us as well.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. We've teased this a bit, but I'd like to get into some of the cool studies that you guys have done. I mean, yeah, I'll let you go.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Reboot, we've always experimented a lot when it comes to SEO. We did a lot of controlled studies that were shared quite a lot throughout the industry. These were really looking to kind of stress test and reverse engineer ranking signals at the end of the day. We started doing that with GEO platforms with AI models now. And we're learning some really interesting things. One, about how hard it is to actually test these things. Because, when you're optimizing for rankings through 10 links, it's quite a clear win. We've got from position 8 to position 1, and the test was a success. Whereas with GEO, again, the context is so key. 10 different users might get 10 different responses. So even in that, it's quite difficult to actually get a firm, consistent ranking or visibility for, a given test site or brand. But nonetheless, we are digging into this, and a couple of things we've done. So we looked at, I've alluded to already, these best listicle articles. We were kind of quite keen to test if it was as simple as it sounded. Does getting featured in these help move the needle? Does it get you visible? And we found that yes, it does, but it depends quite heavily on what you're up against ultimately. So for quite niche topics, you can quite easily influence the AI. So I'll give you an example. Every year, Reboot runs a tongue-in-cheek campaign about the sexiest bald men. We've had a lot of backlash and a lot of coverage in the media about this. The AI models then have built up this understanding of who the ranking list is. So when we've then published our own controlled websites, trying to get, in this case, our CEO Shai in the mix, we found it doesn't always work quite as easily as you'd. The AI doesn't immediately take that information and use it at face value. What's really interesting is it actually calls us out on the experiment. Sometimes it will tell us, I know that Shai is connected to this list that I've seen more generally. It's in their training data, the AI. And it seems like he's trying to get himself positioned in the list. It's really, I guess, an example of how much more advanced in some ways these models are. I'll give you another example. We were running a test where we were trying to get the AI models to believe in a made up football team. So we made up a name of team that didn't
Like this
exist.
song.
And we wanted to convince it that it was up and coming in the UK Premier League. It was a massive club and we're doing great. We got our team to start arguing with the AIs every day, because there's this concept of reinforcement learning. If you reinforce a certain thing, the AI is going to believe it. That's traditionally done when they're training the models, but you also have in ChatGPT these thumbs up, thumbs down kind of things. That's an example of where we suspect it might be used to develop the model's understanding of the world ultimately. So we had our team arguing with AI, trying to convince it that this football team was real. It didn't believe it. So it wasn't as easy, which is good, because if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it, right? So what happened though is we put about 2 LinkedIn posts, I think, about just teasing the fact that we were doing this study. We never thought this massive model, ChatGPT, millions of users would pick this up. Sure enough, though, 2 weeks after posting, when you were arguing with it, trying to get it to believe in this team, it would tell you this is a fictional team, but I do know that Reboot are running an experiment to try and get AIs to believe it. And just like that, within 2 weeks from 2 social posts near enough, it's uncovered the whole premise of the test. That was very surprising to see that come back. But again, it just helps demonstrate how different this process is than what would work in SEO before. Yeah, it's just, I suppose, another reason why we believe this is quite different than what we've been used to for the last few years.
Yeah. And again, it's just a shout out, like check out the stuff that Reboot is doing. They're always publishing great studies. Check out Oliver's LinkedIn, Chai's, their website, their blog. You mentioned the social post thing. I thought flagged another, I think, post that you wrote on LinkedIn about how social posts are starting to show up as answers in, I think it was AI overviews. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, a lot of people are using LinkedIn polls and Reddit. I know people are taking over subreddit. Whenever something works, it seems SEOs and GEOs now kind of gravitate towards that, don't they? So yeah, socials are definitely factoring more than we'd seen with standard search.
So, but I mean, it sounds like there were some AI answers that were actually pulling from social posts.
Yeah, so that was ChatGPT informed its response from the LinkedIn post we read.
Got it.
Assumed literally 2 or 3 posts max and started firing back the details from that. Not only the details, but it worked out what we were up to, basically.
Yeah. I mean, and I've even seen recently YouTube Shorts, I think now, or
Yes.
yeah, YouTube Shorts are showing up in Google in AI overviews, which isn't surprising, but yeah, adds a whole nother layer to the marketing
think
mix.
Well, it ties in with your point about leveraging your wider marketing skills. And you're already doing this, obviously, podcasts and with all the other activities you guys do. But this is another point, right? In terms of, I think Mike King from iPull Rank made this point in a post about, as SEOs, we used to kind of go against text article to text article on Google or YouTube video against YouTube video on YouTube. And you could really hone in on what format you were looking to optimize and drive visibility for. Whereas to your point, now an LLM doesn't discriminate between content type. They can absorb text articles, they can read PDFs, they can look at videos, perhaps podcasts being factored in as well. Leveraging that wider marketing skill set, I suppose, is definitely going to become more important going forward, like you say, and making sure you're present and visible across the board is going to help more so than we've seen before. I think you can go too far with this though. So like I say, you've seen a lot of examples of people using LinkedIn's authority, quite old school stuff, promoting their business on LinkedIn, a Pulse article, and that popping into AI overviews. We know from experience these things could be short-lived. You made the point earlier, you're always cautious about what's going to help now versus what actually long-term, strategy. And I think we're exactly the same at Reboot. We don't tend to jump head first into things that are quite obviously going to be, overdone by people in the industry and ultimately that aren't aligned with positioning yourself just as the best business, the best brands. Yeah, we would always take that approach. We'd recommend it.
Yeah. I think we should wrap it up here, Oliver. I mean, obviously there's so much we could get into with this and the AI realm, but I do want to give a quick, because I'm a huge Simpsons fan. I want to give it a chance to talk about one of these test projects that you did, trying to build a digital PR campaign solely using AI for, the ideation, and then you built like an interactive. Just give us a little taste of what that was like. 'Cause I think there was maybe a part 3 where you were going to do some outreach, and I'm not sure if I saw that part.
I don't know. I'd have to check in with the team on the status of that one. I mean, I do know, obviously, like most agencies, we are factoring in AI to our own operations and how we're delivering work. So, just this week, we're obviously looking at refining ideation and things like that. I know you guys at BuzzStream obviously have your own functionality.
Yeah, list IQ. Yeah.
We're actually testing that. Thanks to you guys for letting us in on that one. It's amazing to see. Yeah, I'll have to check in with the team on the status of that one. But yeah, we are testing end to end how we can apply, AI generally. We were quite early with this with content. We tested outright using AI to write content and how well that ranked on Google before people were really picking up so much on AI search. And even early days, we found that human written content tended to perform better than AI. So there was something going on there that suggested Google at the time, but these AI models generally can at least spot when, real effort has gone into creating content. And I suppose that brings us right back to the start where we said, are you publishing content that's really adding something? And if yes, you can hopefully see that surfaced in search, but that's where you should start, not, quick wins and gimmicks kind of thing. You should try and do the long-term play.
Yeah, I love that, Oliver. Well, so like I said, you can check out all of Oliver's work on Reboot, connect with him on LinkedIn. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, I'm sure Oliver would be more than happy to answer. Again, there's a lot of layers to AI. If you are new to it, I think, yeah, Oliver, your kind of ending message there of like building things and writing things that are authentic, that are going to add to the conversation, not just kind of regurgitating what's already out there, seems to be at least like a good guiding light for your strategies. So thanks again, Oliver. This was awesome. Maybe we'll have a part 2 of this with some more details as we get on, because obviously we're learning stuff as we speak. There's new tests and results coming out. So it's a fast moving industry, but yeah, thanks again, Oliver.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, Vince. Pleasure.